welcome to Highline Heritage Museum. The stage tonight is for 7 stories, and there will be some good ones as usual, as always. And in case you ever cannot make it to the live event, this is broadcast live on the B-Town blog. So don't remember that if you can't make it some night, in case it's too sunny out or something. Every time we have an event as the museum, we take a moment to recognize that we are on native land. Please think in honor of those who have preceded us, including the people of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Nisqually, and Muckleshoot tribes. And as part of, I'm a museum volunteer, as are all of our staff except the director. We count on memberships and donations to keep this place running. And so far we're doing okay, but think of us if you have an extra $30 to spare for an individual membership. And even our admission prices are very affordable. So think of us. And now I will give you over to Sybil, who is one of your MCs for tonight. Thank you.
Our first storyteller this evening is my very dear friend and wonderful helper of 7 stories, Deborah.
I volunteered in an elementary school in Burien for 7 years, and I loved it. I was with kindergarten kids, and I was in my element because it had been years since my kids were that age, and I got to experience again the fun of hanging out with little kids, reading to them, teaching them the letters and the numbers and everything. And I felt like I was doing something valuable, not just for these kids and the school, but for me. I got so much out of it. The woman who is the bilingual para-educator at the school, which is an aide, kind of aide, told me she wanted to retire and she urged me to apply for her job. And I thought, I'm happy as a volunteer, but in this school where I'm happy, a salary full-time, why not? So I hustled down to the district office to apply for the position. The first thing I had to do was a Spanish proficiency test. So I went into the district office, and it was over the phone with some guy in New York. And first we were chatting. It was so great. It was really fun. I'm having a good time. And then he asked me a question which required actual thinking, and thinking on my feet, which I don't do well in English. I mean, I'm just not someone who can be put on the spot and come up with an answer. It was something about creativity and art in the classroom, and I thought, think fast, think fast. And I go, bueno, la creatividad y el arte. And then I started just babbling and babbling and babbling until he said, okay, stop. And I stopped, and I skulked out of that room just feeling like I'd totally blown it. But when I got the results of the test, it was clear that he thought I was very good at Spanish, even though I kind of sucked at thinking. Next I was sent to an office, and this woman said to me, well, you have to take a physical fitness test now. And I said, really? Like what? She said, well, for instance, you have to be able to lift 60 pounds. I said, I can't lift 60 pounds. Besides, what does that have to do with anything? And she looked at me and she said, do you want to apply for this job or not? I said, sure. So I went down to the gym where they were going to give me this test. And this very pretty young woman in a pastel tracksuit comes out, takes me into her room, and took my blood pressure. I said, your pressure is very high. You're not worried about this, are you? Yes. But why? I said, I don't want to lift 60 pounds, especially if it's for no good reason. She said, it's fine. Just don't worry about it. It'll be okay. So first I have to go on a treadmill. Treadmill. And then I have to go up and down a step thing. And by the time I'm done, I'm totally exhausted, and I feel like someone's taking a knife and stabbing me in my thighs. It's time for the 60-pound lift. So she sticks a wooden box, which of course already has some weight to it, on the floor. It's open on top, handles on the side to put your hands. And she took a 20-pound weight and she said, she put it in. Squat down and with your back straight, push up through your heels. So I get down into a squat position. I'm thinking, okay, back is straight, push. And just then I had a childhood memory of watching the Olympics on TV, and there were these Russian weightlifters who were massive, and each of their thighs was like the size of a tree trunk. And so I'm there and I go, tree trunk thighs up. And I came up and she said, you're done. And I was over that hurdle. Finally was the interview. So I got a call telling me where, what time, what day, and the interview was at a high school in a different town. Okay. I got there and a man came out and introduced himself as the coordinator for bilingual positions. I said, oh, it's so nice to meet you. So you'll be interviewing me? And he said, no, the principals can interview you. What principal? He said, the principal of this school. I said, but this is a high school. Why is the high school principal interviewing me for a job at the elementary school in Burien? Well, she's not. She's interviewing you for the job at this school. I'm sorry, I'm confused. He said, what makes you think it has anything to do with an elementary school position? I said, because that's what I applied for. He said, you want to interview for this job or not? I said, sure. So I go into this room with the principal. It's the end of the day, and she's like this. I'm waiting for her face to come crashing down on the table. And I get in there and I go, before we begin, funny thing. And she goes, you want to interview for the job or not? And I said, what the hell? So she asked me her questions. I do my best. I'm totally unprepared. And then it's over. I go outside and I say to myself, what just happened? Now, I found out much later that paraeducator applicants all go into a pool, and when a job comes up, it doesn't matter what school, they're sent out. Well, nobody told me that. So I felt like I'd spent the afternoon in the twilight zone. It just didn't make any sense to me. I didn't get the high school job, which is no big surprise. But I didn't get the job I wanted at the elementary school. I was very disappointed, but I bounced back because now I was official and I could sub anywhere in the district as a paraeducator. And I got myself a shiny new long-term position at an elementary school, like a 5-month position. I had the name tag you wear around your neck, and I was like really pumped. And it didn't take long for me to find out that I hated it. It was one thing to volunteer with cute kids doing something I really enjoyed doing. And it was another thing to be full-time at a place with the drudgery and tedium of playground duty twice a day, cafeteria every day. I didn't really know that was what I was in for, and I wasn't into it because I was fun, I was nurturing, and I was warm and fuzzy, and that's what I had at the elementary school. So at the end of the year, I said goodbye. I thought, I'm done with this, and I need to find some new passion, something I'm really going to enjoy that makes me happy. And my daughter, very obligingly, had her first baby, and I got to start my new career as grandma. Thank you.
So our next storyteller is Peggy, who has dived in. Margaret Cummings. Peggy? Peggy is okay. Okay. No, okay, so it's Peggy. And Peggy has been really helpful again for 7 Stories and a big supporter, and has come in when we revealed that we had these cancellations, so she dived in. So we're real happy that you're here.
It's really nice to see all of you here tonight. This is a very impromptu story. I have not even rehearsed it other than in my brain, but we'll just see what happens. I will have to tell you, it is not comedy hour though. So, diary. I have lots of blank books that would be diaries, most of which just decorate the shelf because I never really write things down. I do a lot of photography, and I guess that's kind of my life story. But also, to me, it's the diary of the mind, and my memories are my diary. So, this past couple of weeks, I signed up for the Burien and SeaTac Community Police Academy. So the first night, we're at the police academy introducing ourselves, and one of the questions was, have you ever had any interaction with the police? And I thought about that for a minute, and the mind diary opened up. And yes, I had. When I was 20, my first car was a 1965 Plymouth Valiant sporty model, with bucket seats, shift on the floor, and a Chrysler Slant 6 engine. That sucker went. And so, as a 20-year-old in this really neat, flashy car with a lead foot, I encountered a couple of officers on occasion, speeding tickets. One time, I rolled through a four-way stop at about 1 a.m. Not a light, not a car in sight, except for the police car that was hidden behind the tree. So, after getting a number of tickets, I had to go to driver education training, and I also had to pay more for my insurance. Needless to say, my lead foot got quite a bit lighter. So, but I still loved that car. It was amazing. Fast forward about 20 years, and I am living on Alki Point at the north end of Beach Drive, across the street from this amazing beach that is now Constellation Park. It's about 10:30 in the evening. I'm brushing my teeth, and the houses are fairly close together. The window is open, and I hear a gunshot. And I'm going, what? That had to be a gunshot in my neighborhood? What's going on? The next minute, there's banging on my door. It's the police. Is anybody home? Remember, this is probably about 1980. No, and this is undercover policemen, no uniform, no radio, no cell phone, no way to call in. So I answer the door, and the officer shows me his badge, and he said, is anybody here? No first aid. We have a victim. And do you have a phone I can use? Because I need to call this in. So I said yes and yes. And I got David, my other partner in life, because we both had advanced first aid and medical training, EMT. And so David went outside to see what had happened, and I got the phone for the officer. Well, we lived on this beautiful stretch of beach that was very dark at night, and it was also a lover's lane place. And I had actually parked there a couple times when I was young. And so it was lovely. You're on the water, you're looking at the mountains and the moonlight. It's just wonderful. It was also the favorite place of a stalker who was robbing people who were there enjoying the view. And he had been pretty successful in his attempts. He hadn't raped anybody, but he'd sure scared people and had robbed them. So these two cops were undercover, and they were parked. And the guy walks down, and he comes up to the driver side of the cop car and points a gun at him. So the policeman in the passenger seat, because this guy was in the road, the policeman in the passenger seat pulls his gun out and shoots the man. And he falls down dead on the sidewalk right by the steps to my house. Well, we were able to determine he was dead when David went out and checked. And so that was one of my more intimate encounters with the police. it didn't bother me that much, and they thanked us. The next day, of course, it was on the news, and they had drawn, this is back a long time ago in crime scenes, they had actually used a piece of chalk to draw the outline of the body on the sidewalk right in front of my door. And that was on the news. And all of a sudden, people are driving along, getting out of their cars and looking at that drawing on the sidewalk and taking pictures of it. And we're going, ugh, that's pretty awful. So a little bottle, a little Purex and a pail and a scrub brush, and that went away. And so that was my primal encounter with the police. And it's interesting to look at the evolution of policing, police gear, the kinds of equipment that we have, cameras, surveillance. Police even use drones sometimes. And compared to these two cops undercover with a dead guy and no radio and no phone or any way to call in. So I'm not sure I like all of the surveillance we have now, but I joined the police academy because I live in downtown Burien and I interact with our community police officer quite a bit, and I wanted to find out more about what goes on behind the scenes, because our officers are human beings and they have really tough jobs and they're very dedicated to what they're doing, and I wanted to get to know a little bit about the job and what it entails, not only in their service, but on what happens and how it affects their lives as well. So I think it will be a very interesting prospect. And I no longer drive with a lead foot anywhere. Now I get now I get a little nervous with everybody going by me at 80 miles an hour on the freeway. So that's my impromptu story tonight.
This story takes place a long time ago, and I need to preface it by saying that I was born in Panama, went to Venezuela, Turkey, France, and Germany by the time I was 12. My father worked for the armed forces as a budget officer, as an accountant. He did not wear a uniform, but we did get transferred like we were in the military. And we usually lived on the economy, as the way my mother called it. But when we got to Kaiserslautern, Germany, we lived in Building 1133 on an army base. And that was not a good fit at all for our family. And so my mother and father discussed it, and they took the big leap of quitting. My father left that position, and we got a military transport, which is, it's basic, let me tell you that. And it took us, it felt like 2 weeks to get on this military transport vessel from Europe back to Florida. We also, when we were in France, got 2 French poodles. So there were 5 children in my family, and my mother and my father, and then 2 poodles. And we hit Florida, and my father, the only job he could get was with a racetrack in Pompano Beach. So he worked for the racetrack, and we lived in a bungalow that was a summer rental. But now it's in the winter, and it doesn't have any insulation. And we are cold, and we are real broke. Christmas came, and no presents. And then I had the misfortune of being in the water and getting crashed by a wave, and so I broke my left wrist. And I felt really badly because it's going to cost money. Well, my father, we saw that it wasn't going to work. We couldn't make it there. So my father went to Washington, D.C., and he searched for a job, and he came back after 4 days or so and said, we all sat down around the kitchen table and discussed. He had 2 offers: Guam or Alaska. So because that was the year Alaska became a state, he decided, and we all decided, there's probably more possibilities there. So we had somehow we got 2 cars, and we all 5 kids, and mother and father, and Gigi and Tylo got into the 2 cars and we started driving the 4,400 miles to Juneau, Alaska. And these are some of my diary entries. The Mississippi River is huge. New Orleans, we went to the French Quarter and we walked around and we went to this restaurant and had Cajun food. It was 7 courses of French Cajun food and we were so stuffed. And then more driving and driving and driving. And I remember that I could fit in the back of one of the cars that I was in that day, and I could just kind of snuggle up on the back of the back seat and then the rear window, and I could lie down and I'd look out the rear window. And at that was a year the Everly Brothers were real popular. I was 12. Dream, dream, dream. Remember? And so we listened to the Everly Brothers all the way, and it just was kind of weirdly romantic and beautiful to see the scenery go by and listen to the music. And I mean, I was in kind of like a twilight zone because we didn't have any place to live. We didn't know, we knew we were getting to Juneau finally, but we finally make it to Seattle, and my father is in contact with his job that he's going to, and he finds out, unfortunately, no housing. There's a housing shortage in Juneau. We can't, there's no place for us to live. So we have to stay in a hotel for a month in Seattle. And we have to go to public school in Seattle. Meanwhile, I mean, I'm 12 with this broken wrist, and I've never been in a big urban school like this. I've been in small, this is America, this is the United States, and it was intense. We made it through, though, and finally, after a month, I think there was still not housing in Juneau, but my father said, we got to get out of here. So he came back, and we took the 2 cars and drove the Alcan Highway up to, I can't remember if we went to Haines or how we came, but we had to take a ferry because Juneau, you can't get in except by water or by air. So we loaded us all up onto the ferry and got to Juneau. I did forget to mention one thing, that in the course of driving the 4,400 miles across the United States, Gigi goes into heat. And so there was a kind of commotion and pandemonium. The dog, the female, goes in heat, and the male was real interested in that. So that was kind of a commotion in our car. We split them up real fast. So when we get to Juneau, we have to live in the Burien Hotel. The Burien Hotel is left over from the gold rush, and it is really, it's a flea bag, but we have no choice. And I remember taking a bath and watching the cockroaches crawl up the wall. And there was a Northern Light United Presbyterian church down a block or 2, and they said, look, you can cook in our kitchen and have breakfast and dinner here in the kitchen in the church. And my family said, thank you so much. And we paid them back later, which is another story. But that really helped us. And after a month of that, we found a house up on the hill, and it was a really nice house. Everybody got their own bedroom. The view from the house looked down over Gastineau Channel, Mount Roberts, and Mount Juneau. And as you know from all the pictures, Alaska is a very, very, very beautiful, rugged, glorious place. And all the kids liked us because we were like a novelty. And so they were very friendly to us. So we had friends, we had this beautiful place, and it was light till 11 o'clock at night. We saw the northern lights, we saw eagles soaring, we saw the bears coming out of the forest. It was wild. And it was the first place that I ever lived for any amount of time. And so it became my hometown, my lodestar, and friends from that time, from when I was 12 to now, are, in fact, some friends are coming tomorrow night for dinner from Juneau. And so we've got these long, it was, for me, it was finally, I had a place that was home, and it was beautiful and comforting, and made me happy. So.
Thank you, Sybil. I'm a person who has never been to Alaska, so I find just listening to her so thrilling and makes me want to go there. So, special treat tonight. We had a few people who were ill and had to drop out. One got a concussion, one has something else. So, if any of you have ever wanted to just get up and tell a story about anything, now's your chance. You see, it's a nice audience. Oh, we have somebody. Oh, hello. What is your name?
Mark.
Mark. Come on up, Mark.
So I never imagined that I was going to be having a story tonight because I enjoy hearing other people's stories, but I'm going to tell you a story tonight that I've told. Margie, how many times would you think I told this story? Maybe 50? It's a very popular people hear it and they said, oh, you got to hear this story. And so whenever I'm in any group of people, somebody says, Mark, you have to tell the airplane story, okay? So this is the airplane story. So it starts, the story takes place, I believe it's like 1974. I had an assignment, believe it or not, in Las Vegas with the Department of Defense. I was working for them, and there's a naval air base there, and I was working on the airplanes there. Anyway, I was coming, and I was gambling every night in Vegas at the meantime. So I was coming back from that 1 week assignment, and it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was crazy hot in Las Vegas, and there's slot machines at every opportunity that you have. Even when you get up right to the terminal to get in there, there's a slot machine right there. You can still play. So there's this clinking, clanging. It's like so, and terribly hot. So we get in the plane, right? And I'm sitting in the second seat. And just as we're getting ready to take off, a man comes in, and he's in a three-piece suit. It's crazy hot now, right? A three-piece tweed suit, sweating like crazy. He's overweight. He's in a rush, sweating like crazy, sits down next to me, right? And they say they're just about ready to get to the door. Oh, sorry, and he puts his briefcase in front of him. And it's just ready to close the door. And he gets up, and he rushes off the plane, okay? And then they close the door, right? And I look there, and his briefcase, a leather briefcase about, like a legal briefcase, it's sitting right next to me, and this guy's rushed off the plane, right? And so in the meantime, the plane is detached and starting to back out on the runway, right? And I say to the stewardess, I said, excuse me, this guy ran off the plane and he left this briefcase there, right? And the stewardess, they're trained in this, right? So they're always smiling and things, but somehow her smile froze on her face. So there's a little bit of background for this. So do you remember there's a D.B. Cooper case of somebody the hijack? Oh, is there? Okay, so this is like 3 years later, right? People are a little nervous. And so the stewardess says, oh, okay. And meanwhile, we're just starting to taxi down the runway, right? She picks up the briefcase. It's like, I want to do that. She picks up this tan leather briefcase. She holds it up. Does anybody claim this briefcase? It's like, the guy ran out of the plane. Anybody? Okay, nobody claims it, right? And she says, we're starting to taxi down. They stopped the plane in the middle of the runway, taxiing. They said, if nobody claims this briefcase, we're going to deplane that. I'd never heard that term before, deplane, right? So sure enough, the emergency vehicles come rushing out there. We're in the middle of the runway, right? They open up the door, they take out the suitcase, and they give it to the security people who rush off the security vehicles, rush off them. And then they close the door, and then we proceed, and then we take off finally. And everybody breathes a sigh of relief. And then the guy comes out of the bathroom. And he comes and he sits down and he says, "Where's my briefcase?" Talk about awkward moments. So anyway, that's my story. So.
Sven has told stories for 7 stories, and every time he tells a story, it's a nice surprise. It's an exciting surprise, and I appreciate him coming forward tonight.
Yeah, I'm not especially looking forward to telling this, considering I have not practiced this at all. It's really impromptu, and that story before me makes this really, nerve-wracking. So, speaking of being, kind of nerve-wracked and all that, I was probably 17 and very, awkward teenager. And I had done a lot of plays, but I always played sort of more of like a supporting character off to the side. I never wanted the main roles. I didn't want the main attention. And I find it a bit interesting that I even get up here and tell stories now, but for some reason it does something for me. This story is a play that we did in junior year of high school. And all the years before that, I was in one of the plays as a supporting character. But in this one, I didn't want to be up there on stage anymore. I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'll be the technical person. I'll set up the sound. I'll run the lights for when it starts getting dark. We did the play outside. The play was actually the book 17 by Booth Tarkington, if you're familiar with that. And it was like adapted by one of the people in the area. They did a pretty good job. So me being 17 and being male and being interested in particular, we are outside of a house with a girl. I like this girl. And I was very awkward. Like we kind of didn't interact very much because it's like, how do you interact with someone you're interested in, and how do I interact with people in general? But so this is going to be a kind of a shorter story because it isn't nailed down entirely yet, being so impromptu. But so it's getting darker. The story's wrapping up. I can't remember any of the people's names, but I think Willie Baxter. He's a mess. He's interested in the baby talk girl. It's a great book if you ever want to read it. It's very awkward. It really gets down the experience that I was having at the time of just not knowing what I was doing and feeling like everything was terrible all the time. So anyway, the play's wrapping down, like the audience members are all sitting down in the driveway, and we were set up on the grass, and I was sort of sitting down here at the thing, and it's like, oh, I really need to use the bathroom. But everybody's like getting up and using the bathrooms there, and then I asked someone, oh, is there like another bathroom? And I was like, oh yeah, there's one downstairs in the basement. So I go down there and use that bathroom, and it turns out I have to go number 2. And then I go to flush, and there's no water. It just sits there. And me being the awkward 17-year-old that I am, I just close the lid, and I don't tell anyone about it. And I go home, and what I imagine, this is the house of the girl that I liked, I imagine they figured out like, oh yeah, we told him to go use the bathroom, and so they know that I went and did that, and I didn't tell anybody, but I never had a shot with her before that point, I'm sure, but I really didn't after that. So I guess it's a little connected to the story before, because there was a bathroom involved in that one too, so there you go. Thank you.
All right, so we have another brave volunteer to tell a story.
Oh, I'm Vicky, and I live locally here. I'm in my 70s, and this is a story that happened to me in my 20s. So I grew up in Michigan, and when I graduated Michigan State, Spartans! I drove 7,000 miles with a friend of my sister's who I'd never really known to pick where I was going to live out my life, because my belief was happiness is location, location, location. And I picked San Diego first because, I can go surfing after work every day. How cool is that? Got up here in August on an 80-degree day, went up on Mount Rainier and found I could play in the snow in August when it's 80 degrees outside. That cinched the deal. But anyway, my first big job was I was the mountaintop caretaker at Crystal Mountain, which is the largest ski area in Washington State. And back in the day, this was in the 70s, mind you, they didn't have a gondola that went up there. They just had 2 chairlifts. And they had to have a caretaker up there because it was very exposed. It's a straight 12-mile shot to Mount Rainier. They used me for search and rescue. They would call me up, we're missing a person on Mount Rainier, get out your binoculars. And I found a couple of people. But I would have to dig out the top of that chairlift in the morning because the wind would blow sometimes 120 miles an hour and leave a big drift. And if they turned on the chairlift from below, the chairs would pop off one after another, and they couldn't operate their ski area. So anyway, this was the end of the season. I stayed friends with a bunch of people that worked up there. And one of they had 2 different ski patrols, the paid ski patrol during the week and the volleys on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And there was a gentleman on the volley patrol whose name was Ben, and he was exactly my age that I am now, like 72, 73. And he would take us younger folk on these adventures. And we called him Obi-Wan because that was right after the first Star Wars movie was out. And so we were out with Obi-Wan, a bunch of us young women in our 20s, and we were climbing Mount Snoqualmie, which is one of the peaks up on Snoqualmie Pass. And it was a June day, I think it was 1977, and it was a very sunny day, and the snowpack was thick. And I just had an uneasy feeling, and we stopped for lunch, and I started hearing avalanches all around. And I said, Obi-Wan, I think we're done. We need to turn around. We need to go. And I had my 40-pound Samoyed with me, Shaka, and a bunch of us. And he says, I'm a mountaineer. I've been a member of Mountaineers for decades. I know about avalanches. We're fine. We're going to keep going. It's like, okay. It was the 70s. I was female and I was young, and we just kowtowed back then. And Shaka and I were in the front of the pack, and we stepped out onto this one spot, and sure enough, it started to avalanche. And it was a type of avalanche called a slab avalanche. And basically, the snow was consolidated, and it was breaking off in these big sheets. And Shaka and I were on a sheet about the size of a king-size bed. And I could see all the other slabs tumbling over, and I thought, if this thing folds, breaks, or tumbles, we're both dead. There's no swimming through the snow and crap they tell you how to deal with an avalanche. And Shaka's on her belly with all of her 4 limbs out, and she's going, ow! And I'm on my back with all my 4 limbs out going, ah! And we're just going faster and faster and faster, and I can see that 300-foot drop at the end. And you can see the pieces just launching out and dropping through space, and I'm absolutely certain this is the end of my life. And for some strange reason, things started to slow down, and we stopped right at the lip. Oh and got up off of there and very gingerly worked our way back to the trail and turned around. And then Obi-Wan agreed and let us go down the hill. And since then, this has impacted my life. Needless to say, I'm very wary of avalanche and avalanche terrain. I go to avalanche training of some sort every winter. I'm still obsessed with snowboarding at 72 and a half. when I shouldn't be, because falling on the side of the hip in hard snow when you're in your 70s, not smart. And it happens every once in a while. And I've studied avalanches and read about every single one. And they've come up with a conclusion that if you're in a party of people, they always tell you, if you're in a party of people, you listen to every last person in the group. And if one person says A, you turn around. And if you're in a group of people and you have at least one woman in the group, your chances of surviving that avalanche are much higher than if you're all men. It's true.
Our final storyteller for tonight is Paul Currington, who runs Fresh Ground Stories downtown Queen Anne, and has been extremely helpful to Seven Stories. So we're really grateful that he's here, and thank you very much for ending our evening tonight.
Yeah, I've been watching in the back all the storytellers, and each one of us looks like we just fell out of this boat. It's just like fall out of a canoe, tell a story. It's all good. It's a great night here in Burien. So when I was growing up in Alaska, I had no friends. I was always saying the wrong thing. I was always doing the wrong thing. And finally, my mom got fed up with this, and she said, look, you need to get good at something. You need to get some kind of talent. So she decided to teach me everything she was good at. Unfortunately, she was an actress from New York. So she taught me how to tap dance. She taught me how to breathe through my diaphragm. And then she taught me this really complicated dance step. I don't know how it goes, but I know it ends like this. It's the shuffle off to Buffalo. Armed with these skills, I go to school, I make no friends. I'm actually repelling children away from me because I'm so weird. So mom thinks, all right, well, maybe you need to learn some skills that are more appropriate to where we're living. So she signs me up for the Boy Scouts. Now, I don't know what the Boy Scouts are like here in the lower 48, but in Alaska, they're basically a paramilitary organization designed to turn boys into men through fear and intimidation. My mother knows nothing of this, and she's so excited. She says, honey, you're going to learn all these great skills. You're going to learn how to start a fire. You're going to learn how to paddle a canoe. You're going to learn how to follow animals through the forest, which are all great skills if you're growing up in 1875. But we go to the first meeting where Mr. Allen, the scoutmaster, announces the troop is going on their first winter camp out of the year, which is going to be my first camp out ever. He's very excited. He gives us a piece of paper with all the Arctic expedition gear we need to get, which we do not have. So I give the thing to my mom. She goes to her favorite store, which is Walgreens, and she gets all this gear. She has no idea. There's no REI. We don't know what we're looking at. So we figure if there's a picture of a bear or a goose on it, it's warm. So that's what we get. The next Saturday, we go, we drive, we get up to Mr. Allen's Suburban. We drive all the way up to Finger Lake, like 4 hours. It's pitch black. It's like 2 in the afternoon. It's pitch black. And we're schlepping across this frozen lake. And we get to the center where there's a little island. And he says, boys, this is where we're pitching tents. And he assigns each of us a tent mate. And my tent mate is David Mason. And David Mason's father has taken him camping every weekend of his life. David knows everything about camping. He's got all the gear, all the tools. He's covered in wool and fur. This is like a 12-year-old Admiral Byrd. He's just got all this stuff on. And he has no patience for me. We're like 2 minutes into this tent business, and he's screaming at me, Currington, how are you ever going to make Eagle Scout if you can't pitch a tent? And I look at him, and I know, I've been a Boy Scout for exactly 4 hours. I already know I'm not making Eagle. I'll be lucky if I make Pigeon. This is not going to work out. We finally get this thing pitched, and we crawl in, and it is blisteringly cold. David crawls into this giant, puffy sleeping bag filled with the down of 1,000 geese. It's just radiating heat. I'm on the other side of the tent in one of those, those Coleman sleeping bags? Those little cheesy, it's like rolling yourself up into a tablecloth. I'm like freezing to death. David takes out a book. We were all told to bring a book. David takes out his book. It's the 1953 Army Cold Weather Assault Manual. He's reading about trench foot, how to kill a man with an icicle. I bring out my book, a collection of essays from the New Yorker, not fitting in again. We make it through the night, we get out, and Mr. Allen, the scoutmaster, is so excited. He's incredibly excited. He said, "Boys, I've got great news. Last night it was 40 below. I'm so proud of you. You're the toughest little boys I know. 40 below, imagine that." And that's all. Like he doesn't say, "And now we're going home," which is what you would say normally. But no, he just assigns us all tasks. He says, "Currington, go down to the lake and get us some fish for dinner." I said, "Mr. Allen, is that the lake we just walked across? It appears to still be frozen." And he said, "Well, son, that's why we always bring one of these." And he takes out this thing he calls an ice auger. It's a little bigger than this. It's like 5 feet tall, a giant corkscrew. He said, "Son, just screw this into the ice, make a hole, pull it out, drop your line in, get some fish." The thing is bigger than I am. So I grab this giant corkscrew. I go down to the lake. I look like Gulliver's wine steward. I get down to the lake and I try to screw this thing, but I'm too weak. I'm small and I'm physically weak and I can't do it, and it's very embarrassing because now all the kids are noticing that I'm too weak to do this. So I go back up to the tents, I get an axe, I get a shovel, I go back down, and I'm just wailing at the ice. I'm just with the axe, and I'm basically mining for fish. And kids are making fun of me because I can't even dig a hole with an axe. I'm so physically small and weak, and it's very embarrassing. And this is what happens all the time. Kids make fun of me, I don't know what to do, and it's horrible, except now I'm trapped. So we're going through this, they're starting to make fun of me, and just then, this older boy comes up on a snowmobile, pulling a little saucer sled. He's from some other camp, and he goes, "Hey, which one of you guys wants to go on a ride with on this saucer sled behind my snowmobile?" And all the kids look at me, because I am the only one without a face mask. And everybody knows, you get dragged behind a snowmobile at 50 miles an hour at 40 below, your face will fall off. And they want to see what I'm going to do. They want to see how I'm going to wiggle out of this. And they're nudging me. They're like, "Come on, man, why don't you get on the sled? Get on the sled. What, are you scared? Are you scared? Why don't you get on the sled?" And I don't know what to do. This is so embarrassing. I can't get on the sled because I'll die. But if I say I don't want to get on this sled, then they're going to make fun of me even more. And finally, I start babbling, and I say, I can't ride on this sled over this bumpy, icy lake. It'll activate my hemorrhoids. Now, I had no idea what hemorrhoids were. I just knew whenever somebody said that, the adults in the room laughed. So I knew it was a funny word. But apparently all these kids knew what hemorrhoids were, and they started laughing. And they were laughing so hard, finally one of the kids gets on the sled, they completely forget about me, and they go off, and I have somehow saved myself from humiliation. Probably the first time I ever managed to talk my way out of this humiliation. Later that day, it's night, we're all up at the top of the hill surrounding this campfire. Mr. Allen is asleep in his tent, and it's freezing. We're not sleeping because it's too cold to sleep. And we're as close to this fire as we can get. We're like as close as you can get without bursting into flame. You know, you're like that little millimeter. And just before like the boots and our hats catch fire, we all start just kind of turn like this little Boy Scout rotisserie. We're just like, "Oh, this is frozen, now we gotta warm this up." We're like the planet of Mercury, just boiling ice, boiling ice. And we're doing this, and one of these kids remembers that I do this thing that's very embarrassing, that gets me teased a lot. And the thing I do is that I don't curse. I'm probably the only kid in school who doesn't curse. And the reason I don't curse is because my mother told me not to curse. My mother is a very powerful woman, so if she said don't do something, you don't do it. And so I never cursed. But I would always get teased, and now I'm getting teased again. And they start talking to me like, "Hey, what's the matter? Why don't you want to say these words?" And I'm like, "I don't feel like saying. I could if I wanted to, but I'm not really so angry right now. I don't know, what's the matter? Are you scared, Paul? Are you scared, Paul? What are you scared?" And I don't know what to do. I'm in the middle of nowhere. No one's going to tweet the whistle at the end of recess. I got to do something. And in the middle of all this, I remembered this album I used to listen to. I loved stand-up comedy. And my favorite comedian was George Carlin. And my favorite bit of his was the 7 dirty words you can't say on TV. And I'd never said these words before, but I'd listened to that routine a lot. And I thought, I wonder if I could do that routine. I mean, technically it's a performance. My mom's an actress. Maybe I have found a loophole in the no cursing rule. So I started doing George Carlin's 7 dirty words. And these kids were blown away. First of all, they'd only heard like 3 of these words. I was saying things they'd never heard of. And after a couple minutes, they started laughing. And then they were just doubled over laughing. They were out of control. First of all, because it's a great bit. But secondly, because I was doing it. The cleanest kid in school. I was suddenly this cursing savant. I was like the Pavarotti of potty talk. They could not believe it. I went like 15 minutes and I was just killing. They were doubled over. And at the end of this, they're out of breath. I nod to them and I slowly walk back to the tent. And I curl up into my little Coleman tablecloth and I go, oh, my mom is going to kill me. I am in so much trouble. These kids are going to tell Mr. Allen, my mother's going to kill me. I may as well just go out in the night and crawl under a bush and die. It'll be less painful than what my mother is going to do to me. I just had this moment of triumph and now doom, death. Well, the next morning we get up and Mr. Allen has a very serious look on his face. He looks at all of us and he says, boys, I have something to tell you. It was 40 below again. You are the toughest little monsters I've ever seen. I am so proud of you. 40 below, 2 days in a row. You are so tough. And then we all pack up and we walk back across the frozen lake. We get in Mr. Allen's Suburban and we're driving home. And it was a little different from the drive up, I remember. We're all like laughing and joking and singing, but nobody's putting me in a headlock, you know? And nobody's thumping me on the back of the head. And I realized I did something here. I think I really did something this weekend. And that's when I realized I'm not going to have to learn how to fish or pitch a tent or start a fire. I'm going to spend my life writing jokes and telling stories and breathing from my diaphragm. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you so much.
I just, on the George Carlin theme, my husband and I were in New York one time, and we got tickets at the cheap place where you get discounted tickets to a show. And it wasn't starting yet, so we went to a little place to have some dinner. We said, we're going to this show at this, will we be done? He goes, yeah. And we're waiting, and we're sitting at the bar. And I noticed the bartender had a baseball bat, which I'd never seen before. I thought that was weird. I didn't know what it was for. But anyway, so he started nudging the kitchen. These people have to go to a show. And they finally bring the food, and we had to go. And he said, I'm really sorry. I'm going to keep it here for you. You come back. I'll have them heated up, and you can eat later. So we do that. We come back, and we're sitting there at the bar eating our food. And it's a different bunch of people. Now it's a bar, basically. And there was someone playing a piano. And there were some people sitting on the side, and I heard them urging, like, go ahead, no, go, do it, go ahead. And then this person gets up. It's like George Carlin. The jacket, the sports jacket, the ponytail, goes up to the mic and turns standing there. And I'm just sitting like from a distance. And then the piano starts, and this person goes, my funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine, whatever it is. And it's a woman. It's not George Carlin. She looked like George Carlin because of the jacket and the ponytail. And she's got this voice. And everybody, I'll never forget this. Like there was a guy sitting there. He just picked up his drink and he's like, everybody, we were all frozen. People who were eating were like, because she blew us away. So that's my George Carlin story.
Come back next month for more stories and tell stories. Yeah, sign up and tell stories. And thanks for coming this evening. Great.